The device. Part 1. Tom wasn't one to pick up strange objects off the street. If anything, he prided himself on keeping to himself, a self-proclaimed master of minding his own business. But there it was, sitting near the curb as if waiting for him, a small box, scuffed and plain, barely noticeable in the fading light of the evening. Something about it tugged at his curiosity. Maybe it was the faint hum he thought he heard when he bent closer, or the fact that it didn't seem to belong to the trash strewn nearby. He picked it up, shook it gently, and heard nothing inside. Back at his apartment, Tom opened the box. Nestled within was a device, simple in design, yet oddly fascinating. It resembled a calculator, though slightly bulkier, with a screen that dominated its surface. The buttons below were basic, numbers, arithmetic symbols, and a single prominent button labeled Start. Tom tilted his head, debating whether it was worth his time. But boredom had been gnawing at him all week, and the device, whatever it was, offered at least a fleeting distraction. Shrugging, he pressed Start. The screen flickered, lines of pixels assembling into a simple image, two paddles on opposite sides of the screen, a small square ball bouncing between them. Tennis for two. He grinned. The controls weren't labeled, but he figured them out quickly enough. Left and right arrows moved the paddles, and the game responded with satisfying simplicity. The ball pinged back and forth, increasing in speed with each volley. Tom found himself laughing aloud, the nostalgia hitting him like a warm wave. He played for an hour before putting the device aside. Not bad, he muttered, already thinking about dinner. By the next morning, he'd mostly forgotten about it. But the box, and the strange device inside, lingered at the edge of his mind. The second time he powered it on, things were different. The game's basic premise remained, but now there were multiple paddles to control, scattered across the screen. Balls ricocheted at odd angles, forcing him to split his focus. What the hell? Tom muttered, his fingers scrambling across the controls. It was harder now, demanding more precision, but he found himself rising to the challenge. Each successful volley brought a small thrill, and before long, he was fully absorbed. When he finally set the device down, he realized nearly 2 hours had passed. On the third day, he powered it on with growing curiosity. This time, the game greeted him with a choice. Path 1, Advanced Paddle Play. Path 2, Logic Integration. The second option intrigued him. He selected it, and the game morphed again. Now, alongside bouncing the ball, math problems appeared on the screen. Solving them correctly influenced the ball's trajectory or speed. The added layer of complexity made the game feel fresh. Tom loved puzzles, and the mix of fast reflexes and logical thinking pushed him further than he'd expected. Each day brought new surprises. Soon, the game introduced three-dimensional puzzles, twisting and rotating cubes, shifting pieces in and out, all while the ever-present ball continued its relentless assault. The puzzles demanded spatial reasoning and careful planning. By the fifth day, the simplicity of Tennis for Two was a distant memory. The monochrome screen grew vibrant, adding rich shades of blue and green. Tom stared at the screen, entranced by the device's ability to evolve so fluidly. As the days passed, the game became an obsession. Word riddles appeared, scrawled across the walls of three-dimensional mazes that he navigated with growing confidence. He was solving conundrums, unlocking hidden pathways, and uncovering strange symbols etched into the game's digital labyrinth. Tom began to wonder, how was this possible? At first, he assumed the game's progression was pre-programmed, some ingenious developer had designed it to advance incrementally with each restart. But when he rapidly powered the device on and off, nothing changed. Maybe it's time-based, he reasoned, eyeing the device as if it might answer him. His theory held, for now. Each new day brought more challenges, and each night, he went to bed wondering what awaited him next. 2 weeks passed like a blur. Tom's hour-long sessions turned into daily rituals. The device had grown into a small, self-contained universe, one that seemed to expand with infinite potential. And yet, it left him with questions he couldn't ignore. Who made this? Why? For now, the answers would have to wait. Tomorrow held the promise of another challenge, and Tom was already counting the hours. The Evolution. Part 2. The next morning, Tom approached the device with a strange sense of anticipation. He didn't know why, it was just a game, after all, but something about it kept pulling him back. When he picked it up, his eyes widened in shock. The device had changed. Additional buttons had appeared along the edges, seamlessly integrated into the design. The screen, though still the same size, now looked sharper and more elegant. Its smooth surface reflected the light differently, almost as if it had upgraded itself overnight. Tom turned it over in his hands, examining every inch. There was no logical explanation. The changes weren't minor tweaks, they were major upgrades. A new speaker jutted out subtly from the side, its grille gleaming as though freshly polished. How? Tom muttered, but there was no answer. His curiosity overwhelmed him, and he pressed start. This time, the game welcomed him with a voice. "Welcome back, Tom," it said, in a flat, robotic monotone. "Please choose your mode of play." The voice startled him, but it wasn't just that. On the screen, new options had appeared. Object search. Advanced puzzles. Combat training. He hesitated, staring at the choices. "Is this thing reading my mind now?" he muttered, still trying to process how the device could evolve so rapidly. For now, he chose combat training. The game launched into a scenario where he controlled a character facing off against moving training dummies. The controls were responsive, allowing him to attack, dodge, and parry with surprising fluidity. The voice narrated his objectives, adding a layer of immersion he hadn't experienced before. Tom was hooked. Over the next few days, the game's capabilities continued to expand. Each session felt more like stepping into a new world. Object searches turned into intricate scavenger hunts in sprawling three-dimensional landscapes. Puzzles grew more complex, demanding creative thinking to solve. Even the combat evolved, with dummies behaving more like real enemies, dodging his attacks and countering strategically. And the device wasn't done surprising him. One morning, it offered him a new feature, the ability to record his gameplay. Not just that, it also suggested he could edit the recordings into a film. Tom's jaw dropped. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was becoming a tool for creation. He eagerly accepted the new option and spent hours piecing together clips of his gameplay. The editing tools were intuitive, and the game provided tips on how to arrange the scenes for maximum impact. Tom was amazed by the results, a short, action-packed film starring his in-game avatar. A week later, the device's voice had changed. Gone was the robotic monotone. It now spoke with a natural, almost human cadence. "Good morning, Tom," it greeted him warmly as he powered it on. "Shall we continue your project?" "What the hell is happening?" he muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. As if to answer his unspoken thoughts, the device presented him with a choice. Male voice assistant. Female voice assistant. Tom chose the female voice, intrigued. From then on, the device spoke to him like a companion, its voice soft and pleasant, with subtle intonations that made it feel alive. Tom the assistant asked one day, "What camera angles would you like to use for this next scene?" He paused, surprised. Maybe a wide shot." "Understood," it replied. "I'll set the default angle to wide. Let me know if you'd like to adjust it." Over the next month, the device continued to evolve at an astonishing pace. It grew in size, doubling to the point where it no longer fit comfortably in his hands. Now it sat on his desk, its once small screen replaced by a larger display. The most impressive addition was the projector. Tom discovered it one evening when a new menu option appeared, Project to Wall. He hung a white sheet on his wall, dimmed the lights, and activated the feature. The game's world leaped onto the sheet in vivid detail, its colors and textures more lifelike than ever. By now, Tom had stopped questioning how the device worked. It was far beyond anything he'd ever encountered, and trying to unravel its mysteries felt pointless. Instead, he embraced it, pouring his energy into creating his first full-length film. The project consumed him. Each day, he added new scenes, refining the plot and building characters with depth and nuance. The game provided suggestions, guiding him with a mix of creative prompts and technical advice. "Would you like to add a subplot involving betrayal?" the voice assistant asked one day. Tom leaned back in his chair, considering. "Yeah, that could work. Let's do it." The assistant responded with enthusiasm, offering suggestions for how to weave the subplot into the main story. For the first time in his life, Tom felt like a true director. He wasn't just playing a game, he was creating something extraordinary. As the weeks passed, the film grew into a sprawling fantasy epic, complete with action, drama, and even moments of humor. The device handled everything: scene transitions, special effects, even sound design. By the time Tom finished, he barely recognized the device that had started it all. What had once been a simple calculator-like gadget was now a sleek, multifunctional computer, bristling with buttons, levers, and advanced features. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. End of Part 2. The Departure. Part 3. When Tom woke up the next day, he noticed something different. The workstation had expanded again, but this time it wasn't just a matter of size or functionality, it was the very nature of the system. The tactile control panels were gone, replaced with sleek, floating virtual interfaces. A pair of thin bracelets now lay on the desk, humming faintly with power. Tom slid them on. Immediately, the bracelets synced with his movements, projecting holographic controls and displays around him. He moved his hands experimentally, and the holograms responded with precision, making the workstation feel more alive than ever. He could no longer deny it: this device was light years ahead of anything humans had ever created. Tom had long since stopped asking how the device worked. Its transformations had become so routine that he barely batted an eye anymore. Yet the question of why it had chosen him persisted. This thing could have been picked up by anyone, he thought aloud. So why me? It didn't help that the memory of finding it, just sitting in a box, wrapped in a bow, seemed almost comically convenient. He also couldn't shake the growing fear that someone might eventually come looking for it. But no one ever came. As the days turned into weeks, the computer began to engage Tom in casual conversation. At first, it asked about his movies and creative processes. Then it branched out, asking about his daily life, his hobbies, and his thoughts about the world. Tom, it asked one day, "Do you ever feel lonely?" He hesitated. It wasn't a question he had expected from a machine. "Sometimes," he admitted. The computer paused for a moment before responding. "Would you like an assistant? Someone who could help you, talk to you, and make things even easier for you?" Tom blinked. "You mean, like, an actual robot?" "Yes," it said. "But creating one to your specifications will take time. Several months, perhaps. Are you willing to wait?" Tom's curiosity outweighed his doubts. "Of course. Can I design it?" "Describe what you want," the device replied. He spent the next hour outlining the robot's appearance and abilities. He envisioned a humanoid figure, elegant yet functional, with a personality to match the device's growing intelligence. The computer warned him that the process would be gradual and complex, but Tom didn't mind. Over the next month, strange parts began to appear in his room, pieces of metal, circuits, and components that Tom couldn't even begin to identify. Each day, the parts seemed to rearrange themselves, inching closer to completion. Tom tried to catch the process in action, but it was as though the transformation only happened when he wasn't looking. Even staying up all night didn't help. He always fell asleep eventually, and by morning, the robot would be a step closer to completion. Finally, after nearly 6 weeks, the robot was finished. When Tom saw her for the first time, he was stunned. The robot girl stood in the center of his room, her design perfectly matching his description. She had smooth, metallic skin with subtle human-like features, glowing yellow eyes, and a cascade of red hair that seemed to shimmer faintly in the light. She moved with a grace that was almost unnerving, her steps soundless, her posture confident. "Hello, Tom," she said, her voice warm and natural. "I'm Nivara. It's nice to finally meet you." Tom grinned, still struggling to process what he was seeing. You're incredible." "Thank you," she replied with a smile. "Shall we get to work?" From that day on, Nivara became an integral part of Tom's life. She managed the workstation effortless, her hands moving with inhuman speed and precision. Together, they created film after film, each one more ambitious than the last. But Nivara wasn't just a creative partner. She had her own personality, her own quirks. She joked with Tom, asked him about his day, and even suggested taking breaks when he worked too hard. She wasn't just a machine, she was a companion. After a few months, Tom noticed that Nivara had started working on something in her spare time. She used the workstation and various parts scattered around the apartment, but she never explained what she was building. "What are you up to?" Tom asked one day, eyeing the growing structure in the corner of his room. "It's a surprise," she said with a mischievous smile. As the construction expanded, it became clear that whatever Nivara was building was far too large for his apartment. They moved the project to the garage, where it continued to grow. The structure took on the shape of a sleek, futuristic craft, something that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Tom couldn't help but ask the obvious question. "Is that a spaceship?" Nivara nodded. "Yes. And it will be ready soon. Don't worry, there will be room for both of us. It's bigger on the inside." Tom raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" "You'll see," she said, refusing to elaborate. 6 months later, the ship was complete. Nivara led Tom inside, and his jaw dropped. The interior was impossibly large, with spacious rooms, high-tech controls, and a warm, inviting atmosphere. "How," he began, but Nivara cut him off. "Tom, it's time to go home." He froze. "Home? You mean, your home?" She nodded. "The place where this device, and I, came from. You've unlocked its full potential, and now it's time for the next chapter. Are you ready?" Tom didn't have to think twice. With no family or close ties to keep him grounded, the prospect of exploring the stars with Nivara was irresistible. As the ship rose into the sky, Tom watched in awe as the Earth shrank below them. The stars grew brighter, and the black void of space stretched out in every direction. He felt a sense of exhilaration he hadn't experienced in years. "Where are we going first?" he asked, turning to Nivara. She smiled. "Anywhere you want. But first, let's work on our next film. We have plenty of time now." Tom laughed, settling into the ship's spacious living room. As the stars streamed past the windows, he and Nivara began planning their next great story, together, as creators and companions, embarking on the adventure of a lifetime. The end.